Did you know Winnie-the-Pooh was actually inspired by the real-life experiences of the author's son? And that the story, loved by millions around the world, ended up ruining that very boy's life? Today's film recommendation is Goodbye, Christopher Robin. It dives into the bittersweet truth behind the heartwarming tale that comforted so many childhoods. Robin Milne was a well-known British playwright in the early 20th century. He served in World War I, and even though he made it back home safely, the experience had a lasting impact on him. He often seemed distant, sitting alone, unable to sleep, lost in thought, sometimes unsure if he was dreaming or awake. Not even the birth of his son could ease his inner turmoil. They named their son Christopher Robin and called him Billy Moon at home. But Alan had no idea how to bond with this constantly crying baby. His wife, Daphne, didn't have much of a connection with the child either. She'd gone through a hard labor and had been hoping for a daughter instead. The thought that their son might grow up and one day go to war like his father terrified her. So, rather than raise him themselves, they hired a nanny named Olive to take care of Billy. Meanwhile, Alan and Daphne spent most of their time wrapped up in London's social scene. Most of Billy's childhood memories were simply of him by the window, watching his parents come and go. One night, during the launch of a new play, Alan had another episode. Standing in front of a packed crowd, he froze, couldn't get his words out, and ended up fleeing in panic. Unlike many who seemed to move on after the war, Alan couldn't pretend nothing had happened. He kept asking himself, what was the point of all the pain and loss if everyone just carried on like it was nothing? If nothing changed, wouldn't war just keep happening? That's when he made a big decision. He left the buzz of London behind and moved the family to the countryside. He needed quiet, space to think, to write, to heal. But even surrounded by trees and birdsong, Alan still couldn't escape the sounds in his head. He could still hear the buzzing of flies, the same sound he remembered from the battlefield. He tried to calm himself down, though his frustration kept bubbling up. Little Billy, watching from the side, thought his dad was just scared of the bees. So he gently told him, as long as you don't bother them, they won't sting you. They're just trying to make honey. That simple line, so innocent, so pure, caught Alan off guard. It's just bees, he thought with a faint smile. It was Billy's childlike honesty that quietly untangled the thoughts in his mind. Alan was grateful, but Daphne didn't see it the same way. She thought Billy was just a distraction, keeping Alan from focusing on his work. Alan's fame was something Daphne loved to show off in London's social circles. If it weren't for Alan's writing, she would have never left the city to live out in the middle of nowhere. But since they moved, Alan hadn't written a single word. When she questioned him, Alan finally admitted he didn't want to write crowd-pleasing plays anymore. He wanted to say something bigger, something meaningful. He was thinking about where the whole country was headed, and he wanted to write about anti-war. Daphne thought that was a naive dream. Being anti-war is like saying you're against Wednesdays. She scoffed. She couldn't stand all the talk with no results. So she packed up and returned to London on her own. And unless Alan started writing something truly amazing, she said she wasn't coming back. After Daphne left, the nanny Olive had to leave too. Her mom was sick, and she had to go look after her. That left just Alan and Billy, alone in the quiet countryside. Billy had no one else to play with except his stuffed animals. He knew his dad was trying to write something important, but deep down he kind of hoped his dad would write something just for him. A book he could read. He promised he would. Alan didn't take it seriously. He figured Billy just wanted more playtime. So the two of them played cricket, went exploring in the woods, and came home to eat pie when they got hungry. Alan even invited Billy's friends, Winnie, Tigger, and the rest, for lunch. And after a big imaginary feast, Billy came up with a wild new idea. They should become snow hunters.
Come on, don't get frostbite.
The forest in early spring turned into a snowy wonderland. But in an instant, a snowball knocked Alan back into the battlefield in his mind. He thought he was being attacked by an enemy. Acting on instinct, he tackled Billy to the ground. Billy didn't understand what was going on in his father's head. He just calmly tried to change the subject. He pointed to the trees and said he thought an owl lived up there. If you look closely, you can even see the front door. Once again, Billy's imagination broke through Alan's darkness. Alan had come to the countryside hoping that writing an anti-war book would bring him peace. But it wasn't silence or solitude that healed him. It was Billy's innocence and wonder. That's when Alan finally knew what he needed to write. He called up his friend Ernest. Together, they decided to create a book of poems and illustrations based on Billy and his stuffed animal friends. That book would become Winnie-the-Pooh. He used Billy's real name, Christopher Robin, as the name of the main character. Because while it was Billy's name, it wasn't quite the real Billy. They recreated the moments Billy spent playing in the woods, visiting Owl with a red balloon, wandering freely among the trees, and living in a world full of imagination. Ernest said it felt like a fairy tale version of paradise. Alan sent one of the poems he'd written for Billy to Daphne, who was still in London. When she read it, she knew Alan had found his voice again. She kept her promise and returned to the countryside. And on a whim, she submitted the poem to a magazine. The issue sold out instantly. People bought copies not just for themselves but for friends and family. Olive, back from her hometown, said her relatives had even ripped the page out and framed it. When the Winnie-the-Pooh books came out, they were a smash hit. The stuffed animals flew off the shelves. Kids everywhere could name every single character. After the war, people were heartbroken. Many had forgotten what happiness even felt like. But Pooh was like a faucet. Once you turned it on, happiness flowed out and filled people's hearts. Naturally, no one wanted to let that feeling go. This 6-year-old kid not only has to reply to tons of letters from readers, but also has to show up in performances the town puts on just for him. Even his phone calls with his dad are recorded and broadcast on the radio for everyone to hear.
I don't understand. Why is there someone else talking? Why did he call me Christopher Robin? He never calls me Christopher Robin.
This kid was one of the world's first child stars. He was the real-life inspiration behind Christopher Robin from the globally beloved Winnie-the-Pooh stories. When he was 6, his father, Alan, created Winnie-the-Pooh based on the times he spent playing in the forest with his stuffed animals. Once Winnie-the-Pooh was published, it became an instant hit, flying off the shelves, and the merchandise raked in tons of money for the family. But little Billy didn't understand any of this. All he wanted was to go back to the forest and play with his dad. But instead, Alan took him to an upscale toy store, where they attended a party hosted by strangers. The store manager announced a contest. The winner would get to have tea with the real Christopher Robin and Winnie-the-Pooh. Billy snapped, shouting that it wasn't the real Pooh, that it was all a lie. He was sick of always playing another role. He was Billy, not Christopher Robin. Billy could see clearly that since the release of Winnie-the-Pooh, his parents had become obsessed with the book. He was just the tool they used to show off to the media and readers. To him, his mom wasn't really his mom anymore. She was like his agent. The only person who still saw him as Billy was his nanny, Olive, who had always been there for him, quietly playing the role of the mother figure, even taking on duties that should have been his mother's. Olive became the only person Billy could truly confide in. But then Olive started dating and Billy took it hard. He felt like even Olive didn't love him anymore. He started to feel like a child with no one who cared for him in this world.
Don't marry him, Nu. Marry me. Please marry me.
Fearing that Olive would leave him once she got married, Billy went as far as telling his mom. But Daphne's harsh words only made Olive more certain about her decision. Before she left, Olive threw aside her role as a nanny and told this couple exactly how she felt.
I don't think you've been doing what's right for Billy. Not at all. You've been touting him around like a show pony hawking your books.
Just a minute.
He has to be allowed to grow up. He has to know he's important to someone, that someone cares about him.
Yes, I gave birth to him. He nearly killed me.
With respect, ma'am, a cow can give birth. I think you know all this, sir, but you let it go. And that's not right. A father should stand up for his son.
That's quite enough.
I think I've seen you catch his eye and turn away. You can't turn away anymore.
Olive was right. Alan thought he had written a book for his son, but in truth, he had stolen Billy's story and used it to build his own success. Along the way, he also took away his son's joyful childhood. Daphne was even more consumed by greed, treating Billy like a product to be managed. She packed his schedule with endless media appearances, never once considering how he actually felt. When father and son went out for a simple meal, they were treated like a public attraction, stared at like animals in a zoo. The bright smile that used to light up Billy's face slowly disappeared. Eventually, Alan realized what he had done. He told Billy he would stop writing the Winnie-the-Pooh series and decided to send him to boarding school, thinking it might give him a fresh start. But Billy's delicate, doll-like features made him a target. Kids mocked him for looking like a girl, and once they found out he was the real-life Christopher Robin, the bullying only got worse. As Billy grew older, World War II broke out, and he finally saw a chance to prove himself. But he failed the physical exam, and while his parents were quietly relieved, Billy was crushed. Alan tried to comfort him, saying there were other ways to help the country, like changing road signs to confuse the enemy. He even mentioned how the 100-acre wood was doing its part. But Billy didn't want to hear about that silly bear anymore. In that story, he was just a made-up character, never real. But now he was grown, and he didn't want to be Christopher Robin anymore. He wanted to be a soldier, a real person. And even though he knew he wasn't fit to serve, he also knew his father could make it happen if he wanted to.
You're one of the best-loved men in the country. I helped you become that. Now it's your turn to help me.
Billy finally got his wish. He put on the uniform and became a soldier. At the train station, right before departure, he looked at Alan and said the bear had turned his life into a tragedy. Even the smallest mistake at school would get him bullied. Those days they spent playing in the forest, to him, it felt like his dad was just doing research for the next book. After that, Alan never played with him again. And worst of all, he turned those precious memories into something to be sold. Billy refused to take even a penny from the money earned through Winnie-the-Pooh. He didn't want it because to him, those moments weren't business. They were just a boy playing with his dad. He never cared about fame or money. All he ever wanted was something every kid longs for, his parents' love. As soon as he finished speaking, the train whistle blew. Without looking back, Billy stepped onto the train. He didn't hear Alan whispering, "Don't go." He didn't see the way Alan still saw him, as just a little boy. Years later, Billy came home one night, worn out and weathered from war. Before that, Alan and Daphne had received an official notice saying Billy was missing. They thought he was gone forever. Alan grabbed his son's hand tightly, as if afraid it might all be a dream. The war had changed Billy. It gave him a new understanding of his father. They returned to that same forest from long ago. And there, Billy told his father. One day, in the middle of the desert, under enemy fire, one of the soldiers began singing a song from Winnie-the-Pooh. And somehow, as they sang, it felt like magic. Like they were brought back home, sitting by the fireplace with a storybook in hand. That, Billy said, was his father's gift. Yes, he had lost his childhood. But all those beautiful things, those sweet little friends, the wonderful stories, and the love of a family, he had them first, and they would always belong to him.
Come on, then.
Where?
Home, I should think.
And with that, the movie ends. Goodbye, Christopher Robin tells the heartbreaking story behind Winnie-the-Pooh. It's sad to see how a story that brought so much joy to countless childhoods caused so much pain to the real Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin kept his promise his whole life and never got a single penny from the Winnie-the-Pooh stories. Feel free to share your thoughts about the movie in the comments, and see you in the next movie.